All right, guys. Happy Monday, everybody. If you can call a Monday happy, I don't know. Sorry, can't do anything about that. It is Monday. But at least the weather's not too bad. We were supposed to get hit with like 3 major storms here last week, and none of them ever panned out. We just got rain, so that's pretty cool. Winter's winding down, spring's on the way. It's my favorite time of year. I love it. Winter's behind us, the spring and the summer are ahead of us. It's pretty cool. But then again, the boys at Harp could screw that all up. You just never know in this Orwellian world of ours. But yeah, welcome to the first of what's going to be 5 days a week of broadcasting of Truth Hertz. I've been doing Sunday shows for a while. I was filling in Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays in the afternoon for an opening they had. But now I bit the bullet and have picked up 5 shows a week. It can be kind of hectic sometimes, planning guests and topics you want to discuss, but it's great. I love it. I've done it. I used to do like 7 or 8 shows a week years ago, so I'm not a stranger to that. It's just it can be a lot of work, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I love researching. Doing broadcast radio has inspired me, pushed me to do a lot more research. I've always been interested in researching anyway, but this has just forced me to do it on a much more heightened scale, and it's led me to some mind-blowing discoveries. They're not always pleasant ones. In fact, most of the time, it's very unpleasant, hence the name Truth Hurts. Keep saying I should change it to Truth Sucks. The truth does suck, let's face it. Finding out that we don't live in that cozy, comfy world we thought we did, where our government and our religious leaders and our people in the media and the education system care about us and want us to know the truth. And, it's just, when you first find out the truth, it just smacks you right in the face. We don't live in that kind of world. We live in a world of scum, trash, verminous criminals that want to exploit us, suck us dry, and then when they're done, toss us out like a disposable Gillette razor. That's the kind of world we live in, folks. Sorry to tell you, but that is the facts, Jack. And so, yeah, that's what this show is about, and I'll tell you, in just the past few months, past few weeks for that matter, I've made yet even more shocking discoveries. Some of them so shocking, I don't even know if I'm going to go on the air with them. It's just unbelievable. But I will, because my conscience drives me to share my findings with people. I can't hold the truth back, even though the implications of sharing some of my findings are very life-shattering. Might even cause me to lose some friends, lose some listeners. I don't know. I hope not. I hope, I'm sure the bulk of the listeners to this show listen because they want the truth, regardless how much it hurts. So I intend to keep sharing that truth. But I'll tell you, over the years, I have actually, indeed, lost a lot of friends. But then again, could they have been friends in the first place? If people abandon you because you're telling them the truth, I guess they really weren't your friends to begin with, and they weren't worth holding on to. Anyway, guys, interesting topic today. Stick with a short break. Be right back. Okay, folks. Welcome back to Truth Hertz Radio. If anybody wants to call in during the broadcast, the number to do so is area code 512-904-8014. Again, that's 512-904-8014. If my buddy Mike Anthony is listening in, I wanted to thank him for a package I got this week. I meant to send him an email. I totally forgot. Mike, of course, is the herb guy that you hear me do the commercials for. Definitely check them out, folks. I tell you, it's unbelievable. My personal favorite is Rapid Heal. You always want to keep a bottle of that on hand. Should you, God forbid, get some injury or something, you want to have that on hand. It's just incredible stuff. It'll kill the pain instantly, and you will indeed heal rapidly. You'll be astonished what this stuff will do for you. Yeah, and then System Toner is something else, too, that I use on a regular basis just for general health maintenance. I wouldn't give a plug for a product that I didn't believe in and that I didn't personally use and that I wasn't convinced really worked well. And this stuff definitely works well. Anyway, our topic for today is the Bilderbergers. Yes, the wonderful Bilderbergers. Who are they? What are they up to? What have they been doing? I'm sure a lot of our listeners are aware who they are, but perhaps we'll be covering some new details today people weren't aware of, some of the influences that they've been having from behind the scenes over the past several decades since they were formulated in the early 1950s. It was created by several prominent elitists from Europe. There are American members, but it's predominantly European. Most of its members are European elitists. And it's comprised of, like the Council on Foreign Relations, which is somewhat the American version of the Bilderbergers. It's comprised of not only very affluent business people, but government officials as well, people in the media, people in education. And they meet annually at various locations. Every year they pick a different location. And they decide where they want the world to go next. And from there, all the other secret societies around the world follow in tandem. Council on Foreign Relations, for example. Their duty really is simply to carry out the agenda of the Bilderbergers. Once they have a meeting and decide what direction they want the world to go for the coming year, here in the States, the CFR their duty is to carry out what was decided at the last Bilderberg meeting. And it's interesting, if you pay attention to, weeks that come out of these Bilderberg meetings, you'll discover that, sure enough, in the ensuing weeks, months, just what was said at these meetings, what was decided at these meetings, does indeed wind up happening at the behest of the CFR and other secret societies that work in tandem. In fact, you'll find that people who belong to the CFR usually belong to the Bilderbergers as well, and vice versa, as well as the Trilateral Commission. And, in coming shows, I'll be covering all of these various groups. But they really are branches of the one same beast, if you will. They're all working toward the same goal: world government, world domination. And anybody who can't see that now, quite honestly, I'm amazed that you can walk and breathe and keep yourself alive. If you don't have the intelligence now to see what's going on, there's no excuse for ignorance anymore. In fact, I think most people now who deny that there's a conspiracy for world government actually know that there is, and they're just being paid to deny it, hoping that they can sucker a few mindless, gullible drones into believing them. But I think by now most intelligent, thinking, breathing people know that we are in the midst of a whopping, monstrously evil conspiracy for world government. But the point is just not arguable. Anyway, let's look at some of the people who helped to found the Bilderberg Group. He'll tell us a little something about what this group is about. Dr. Joseph H. Ratzinger. Kind of sounds like Ratzinger. Got a show coming up on that little rat in the future, maybe later this week. Anyway, Joseph Ratzinger, who died in 1960, amongst other things, he was an economist, political philosopher, a communist. Well, that's no surprise. Most of the elitists pushing for world government are, in fact, either communists or socialists or fascists. It really doesn't matter. It's all the same thing, basically, when you strip away the facade. Anyway, he was a major proponent of a united Europe. Again, that shouldn't be any surprise because the European Union, which is what it's now called, was called the European Economic Community, the EEC, is something that Zbigniew Brzezinski mentioned in his 1970 book, Between Two Ages, as being part of a incremental process to bring about world government. He says we need to bring nations together regionally first, and then from there, it'll be easy to bring about world government, get nations used to cooperating with each other economically, politically, socially, whatever, on a regional basis, and then from there, bring them all into a world system of government. It'll be much easier. And that's exactly what they're doing. You know, we've got the African Union, the East Asian Union, we've got the North American Union that they're forming right before our eyes. In fact, I think that's kind of been put on the back burner right now, realizing that so many people have woken up to the little shenanigans. They're kind of holding off on that. That was supposed to be implemented. I almost said last month, now 2 months ago. This is actually March 1st today, I just remembered. Happy March, everybody. But back in January, the North American Union was supposed to have been fully implemented. The deal that was signed by Bush, Vicente Fox, and of course the Canadian Prime Minister in 2005. But stick around. You can bet it's going to happen, folks. And why? Because A, they're determined to make it happen, and B, the populace, the general populace, is in a coma and doesn't seem to give a frog's fat fanny how many more wars they lie us into, how much more authority and our Constitution is destroyed, on and on it goes. So, unfortunately, with all those factors, it's pretty obvious it's going to happen. It's pretty disgusting. While the world sleeps, the elites are planning our demise and carrying out our demise, I might add. Anyway, Joseph Ratzinger was assisted by several others in creating the Bilderbergers. Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands is another one. Colin Gubbins, former director of the British SOE, or Special Operations Executive. Then there was General Walter Bedell Smith, former American ambassador to Moscow and director of the CIA, who said when he took over the CIA, quote, "We can't lick world communism. No counterinsurgency plans will work. We must compromise and coexist with communism." Yes. And just look at our state of affairs today. All right, guys, short break. Stick with us. All right, guys, welcome back to Truth Hurts Radio. Here's hoping you enjoy having your paycheck raped and pillaged every week to help support the New World Order. The Bilderbergers want to thank you from the bottom of their heart. Scum of the earth. Anyway, I was talking about General Walter Bedell, one of the Bedell Smith, that is, one of the co-founders of the Bilderbergers. He had later become Undersecretary of State in the Eisenhower administration. You see, that's how it is when you have friends in high places, and when you belong to such groups as the Bilderbergers. Oh, yes, the sky's the limit. You'll have all kinds of doors open for you, no problemo. Just be a scumbag, hiss like a snake, sell out your fellow man, be a traitor to the entire human race, as a matter of fact, and you will go places. Yes, that's how this phony world of ours works. Anyway, the first meetings of the Bilderbergers were held from May 29th to the 31st in 1954 at the Hotel de Bilderberg, from whence the group got its name, of course. Although they often refer to themselves as the Alliance, and this is located in Oostenbeek, Holland, by the way, where the hotel was, the Bilderberg Hotel. The Alliance is a little inside name that they like to call themselves. It's an alliance, all right. You know, where do you usually hear the term alliance used? It's usually used in association with war, isn't it? Allies. Well, there you go. Because we are at war, folks. They're waging a war against us. You think that's, some name they picked out of a hat? No, that's deliberate. Everything they do is to smear it in your face. And that includes their little pet name they have for themselves. They want you to know that they're waging war against you. But they want you to know in a covert manner, not openly. They're not going to come out and tell you on the evening news. They know that most people don't pay attention to this stuff, but for the few that do, they love to smear it in your face. That they are, in fact, we're at war. They are, in fact, waging a war against us. Charles Douglas Jackson, Vice President of Time Magazine, Delegate to the United Nations, Special Assistant to the President, and later Publisher of Life Magazine, served at the first Bilderberg meeting as spokesman for the American delegation led by David Rockefeller. Oh, yes, the Rockefellers have had their fingers in that pie from day one. Interestingly, David Rockefeller went on to found the Trilateral Commission. Now, why do you suppose he would do that? There were already several existing secret societies, but, in the mind of the elites, there can never be enough. The more secret societies, the better. And literally, this is how they confuse the public. At all these different organizations with seemingly different goals, different names, it's all a distraction. People don't recognize that there is, in fact, this conspiracy to all these different groups, though they seem different on the surface, are all tending toward the same end goal. Anyway, Jackson made this promise present at this meeting. He said whether he, Senator Joseph McCarthy, dies by an assassin's bullet or is eliminated in the normal American way of getting rid of boils on the body politic, well, by that, I'm sure he meant, demonizing him in the press or whatever. I prophesy that by the time we hold our next meeting, he will be gone from the American scene. So see, there you go. These guys boast of their power, boast of their ability to influence politics, to get people out of office or in office as they see fit. And that's exactly what they do. Look at the Bush administration. What better, clearer example can you give of stealing, rigging elections than that? There's been rigged elections in this country before that, of course. And no doubt there'll be many more in the future, but nobody can deny that. Even the General Accounting Office stated that there's serious reasons to question the 2004 election results. And to warrant an investigation. There's several inconsistencies, and, for them to make a statement like that, how can anybody deny it? This is what they do, folks. They put in power who they want, regardless what the public wants. Of course, it didn't really matter who got in 04 or any other election for that matter, because all the candidates are all handpicked anyway. But nevertheless, there's always one puppet, one robot that they favor the most, that they want in more than the other candidates, so they'll rig it just, to ensure that that one gets in. Obama was their man of choice this last election. They didn't really have to rig that one in the sense of, staging it through the die bowl machines or whatever. They just sat back and let the people's will be carried out because, of course, he was their little puppet that they wanted in. They knew it was time. The American people wanted a change, and as always, the only change they get is a new face and a seemingly different party, but of course it's just the other side of the same coin. But they knew that they could get their agenda pushed through more easily. I talked about this, last week? I think I did a show on Obama. Brzezinski said it, Kissinger said it. This economic situation is not a crisis. This is a great opportunity. Talking about how they can exploit his popularity to get their agenda through. And that's exactly what they're doing. But always, guys, the Bilderbergers are at the helm of this whole thing. You climb to the top rungs of the ladder, and you'll see that the reason why things are moving the way that they are, going in the direction that they're going, is because of decisions that were made at the last Bilderberger conference. That's all there is to it. Anyway, McCarthy, of course, was the crusading senator who revealed that communists had infiltrated in high-level positions within the U.S. government. He didn't die until 1957. But the real problem that McCarthy had uncovered, of course, was the infiltration of communist philosophy CFR infiltrators in high positions of the federal government. They weren't Soviet collaborators, per se. What he had stumbled upon was this conspiracy for world government. CFR members and, of course, Bilderbergers. or at least CFR members that were being controlled by Bilderberg. CFR was actually created in 1921. It was an offshoot of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. But as time went on, the Bilderbergers were created. They became the puppet string pullers that manipulated the CFR from behind the scenes. Again, the CFR originally was an offshoot of a European creation. It's always from Europe, really, where the main decisions are being made. That's where this whole thing was launched and continues to be controlled from. All of the globalists here in this country, folks, are just puppets. Absolute puppets. They don't operate in our interest at all, and they haven't for a very long time. Any exceptions that come to play to that rule, they wind up dead. Case in point, of course, JFK. All right, folks, with a short break, stick with us. Be right back. All right, guys. Back on Truth Hertz Radio. Let's look at some other individuals who helped with the establishment of the Bilderberg Group. Alistair Buchan. He was the son of Lord Tweedsmuir and chairman of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Mentioned that before the break. They were really the founders of the Council on Foreign Relations. The British version of it, or I should say the CFR was the American version of the Royal Institute. Anyway, Robert Ellsworth was another one from Lazard Perez and Company, or Freres and Company. Can't even pronounce these European names. John Loudon, representing N.M. Rothschild. Naturally, the Rothschilds are going to have their fingers in that pie. Paul Nitz from Schroeder Bank. C.L. Sulzberger of the New York Times. Then we had Stansfield Turner, who later became another CIA director, of course. Notice how the CIA's fingerprints are all over the Bilderberg Group, right from the very start. By the way, I think there's only one exception to the rule, but other than that, every CIA... No, actually, there's no exception to that rule. I'm thinking of the State Department heads. Every State Department Secretary of State that we've had since 1921, when the CFR was founded, with only one exception, and I forget who that is now, but every other Secretary of State has been a CFR member. But literally every CIA director has been a CFR member, and very prominent CFR member at that. So notice the correlations here. It's very, that should tell you who the CIA is really working for. It's obvious the CIA is corrupt, but a lot of people still think it's a U.S. government branch, it operates on behalf of the U.S. in a corrupt fashion, but on behalf of the U.S. interests. No, it doesn't. Never has. Never has, folks. CIA working for the CFR works on behalf of big money, big elitist interests. In fact, you can say that for all intelligence agencies, and it's true. MI6, Mossad, on and on. They all work for the interests of big money and for the New World Order. That's it. They don't work on the interests of their native populations. They could give a frog's fat fanny. Anyway, Peter Kalvakoreski of Penguin Books, believe it or not, was another co-founder of the Bilderbergs. Penguin Books. Jeez, man, they got their fingers in every pie. Andrew Schoenberg of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. That shouldn't surprise us. You see how these groups are all interconnected. Daniel Ellsberg, who later worked in the Pentagon under Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, was a co-founder of the Bilderberg Group. Isn't that interesting? Of course, Mr. McNamara was no prize himself. He only just died, I think last summer? That old coot kicked off finally. Henry Kissinger, when's that old coot going to kick off, that piece of trash? how many fiascos that man has been behind. And George W.'s first choice pick to head up the 9/11 Commission. How could people think there was any legitimacy to that, or that there was going to be any legitimacy when he picked Mr. Cover-Up Kissinger to head the thing up? That was his first choice. Unbelievable. But of course, because I had to reveal all my business ties, I had to abdicate that position. I wanted to do it. I am good at covering things up, but, I could not reveal all my business ties. Whatever. Lord Rothschild and Lawrence Rockefeller handpicked 100 of the world's elite, which had a heavy cross-membership with the Council on Foreign Relations, of course, as well as other elite groups in the U.S. and Europe, to head up the original Bilderberg panel. Notice, though, it's always the elites, to ensure that the interests of the elites are served. How can people possibly fall for the shenanigans of politics when it's always, wealthy, high-class society, especially low class, but you know what I mean, who wind up holding high positions in politics? How can people think that it's a joke, folks? It's unbelievable. How can people think that their interests are going to be served? People who actually work for a living, who actually have dry skin and blisters on their hands, instead of those baby butt smooth hands that they have on Wall Street. How can people think that such individuals are going to serve their interests? They've never worked a day in their life. They don't even know what the word means. And somehow, they're going to serve their interests. The working class interests are going to be served by these scum, these parasites, these leeches. When are people going to snap out of it? Anyway, one of their main goals, stated goals originally, the Bilderbergers, was to regionalize Europe, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. According to Giovanni Angeli, the head of Fiat, he made this comment: European integration is our goal, and where the politicians have failed, we industrialists hope to succeed. So there you go. That's the motto of the Bilderbergs. We're going to take over, us wealthy individuals. We're going to see to it that the world works according to our interests, because politicians aren't doing it. Well, they are now. In fact, they were doing it then, but not enough to their liking. The lust for wealth and power knows no end. It has no bounds. And it's never enough. They always want more. Always want more. In Alden Hatch's biography of Prince Bernard, he stated that the Bilderberg Group gave birth to the European Economic Community, the EEC, which now, of course, is the European Union. So once again, they were at the helm of this. No surprise. I mentioned earlier that Bilderbergers are and ever have been comprised mostly of European elitists. And as Brzezinski said, in order to bring about world government, we have to bring nations together regionally first. And so the first major step was to create this European Union. But of course, they did that even incrementally. They didn't first introduce it as a governmental body. Of course not. People would have smelled the rat. They would have recognized it for what it was. So they started off as an economic partnership. Again, the European Economic Community. Nobody was suspicious because, it's all about trade. It'll be mutually beneficial to everyone. But as time has gone on, this economic union has turned into almost a fully fledged government. I'll do a show on that at some future point. You won't believe how the European Union actually works, folks. The parliament, the voting body, the scam that it is. I mean, it's all set up so that the elites will get every time what they want, regardless. Even if they had some honest people in there, even if the majority of people in the European Parliament were honest, it wouldn't matter. The thing is all set up so that the elite's interests will always be served, and that the voting process is just a facade. It's for public show. But it turns out most of the Parliament members are, of course, pieces of trash to begin with, but It doesn't matter. The thing is all rigged, so that, any honest ones in there that try to voice their opinion, they don't even have time. They're literally given, 5 or 10 seconds, sometimes to vote on major issues without even time for discussion or even looking at the piece of, proposed legislation. Well, not legislation. It becomes legislation later in the member states, but the proposals or resolutions or whatever, kind of like how the UN works. The UN will vote on something, and next thing you know, all the member states start enforcing these decisions as law. That's how the European Union works. Come on, folks. They even got a European Constitution drafted up. It's incredible. And now, of course, they have the euro, the European dollar. All the nations, the individual nations have lost their own individual currencies. They're losing all of their individuality. And you wait, folks. It's going to happen here with the little North American Union. Anyway, another short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Okay, folks. Back to Hertz Radio. Boy, I really got to pick up pace. Already almost halfway through the show, and I'm only on page 4 of 14 here. Lots of ground to cover. I don't know what the time goes. As always, though, if you want the transcripts, just email me at truthhertzradio@aol.com. Spell Hertz, Hertz. Be happy to send them off to you. The Bilderbergs, as I mentioned earlier, hold their annual meetings at various locations around the world, mostly somewhere in Europe or somewhere in the U.S., sometimes up in Canada. In Europe, the Rothschilds have often hosted some of the meetings, while the meetings in 1962 and 1973 in Salzgibaden, Switzerland, or Sweden, were hosted by the Wallenbergs, who had at that time an estimated fortune of $10 billion. By today's standards, it's probably several hundred billion. That was a lot of money back then. Anyway, well, 10 billion's a lot now, but, compared to some other fortunes, that's nothing anymore. But anyway, the meetings were chaired by the German-born Prince Bernhard, the husband of Queen Juliana of the Netherlands, said to be the richest woman in the world, again at that time, because of her partnership with Baron Victor Rothschild in the Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company, owning 5% of the stock, which in 1978 was worth $425 million, and also held stock in Exxon, which of course is the Rockefeller Company, formerly known as Standard Oil. Interesting how the U.S. government broke up Standard Oil, probably just as a token for the public to make it look like they're actually doing something. But it didn't matter because all the Rockefellers did was just break it up into, other different groups that seemingly didn't have their fingerprints on it. That's all they ever do. Anyway, Bernhard was forced to resign as the Bilderberg chair in August 1976 because of his involvement in the Lockheed aircraft bribery scandal and his extramarital affairs. Not that the Bilderbergers care, of course, about corruption. That's right up their alley. But, they didn't want the bad PR. Anyway, understanding the philosophy of Bernhard can teach us a lot about the philosophy of the Bilderbergers itself as a whole. And the following statement made by Bernhard is particularly enlightening. He said, "Here comes our greatest difficulty, for the governments of the free nations are elected by the people. And if they do something the people don't like, they are thrown out. It is difficult to re-educate the people who have been brought up on nationalism to the idea of relinquishing part of their sovereignty to a super-national body." Unbelievable. You talk about right in your face. You can't get more bold-faced than that, folks. Our real problem here is we got to stop this idea of government for the people. We've got to brainwash them and convince them. You remember, it was last couple of weeks ago, I was talking about Mikhail Gorbachev's push for a new way of thinking. This is what it's all about, to brainwash people, especially, kids in the education system, get them while they're young, to accept the idea that national sovereignty isn't a good thing, and keeping government under control and making sure that they're operating above board and in the interests of the general population, that's got to stop. We've got to convince people that it's not a good thing. It's incredible. Any suckers listening out there that think the government should be operating on behalf of big money? Give me a call. Anyway, after Bernard's removal, Walter Scheel of Germany took over as the Bilderberg chairman, followed by Britain's Lord Carrington, who was on the board of the Hambros Bank. There you go. There you go. Always got to get those big money wheelers and dealers in there. The big top-notch thieves of the planet. Anyway, there's about 120 participants that are invited to the Bilderberg meetings each year, of whom about 2/3 come from Europe, with the rest coming from North America. The meetings, that sounds like the ratio of the top-notch heads of the Federal Reserve. About 60% of them are foreign folks. Europeans. Bilderbergs, actually, as it turns out. Mostly foreign-owned, though. The top primary stockholders of the Federal Reserve are, in fact, foreigners. Another reason to show people, another way to convince people that the Federal Reserve is a fraud. Anyway, the meetings are, once again, closed to the public and the press, except for the compliant media chieftains, of course, who belong to the group. A brief press conference is usually held at the conclusion of each meeting to reveal, in general terms, some of the topics which were discussed in very, very general terms. The resort areas and hotels there that they meet at are, of course, cleared of residents and visitors and surrounded by soldiers, like an armed camp. Literally, there's armed guards, the Secret Service, state and local police. All conference and meeting rooms are scanned for bugging devices before every single meeting. Do you suppose they have something to hide? But this is incredible. Most people, again, have never even heard of Bilderbergs. And the few that have, a good many of them don't realize what really goes on. Jesse Ventura did a good job a couple months back. He did a show on the Bilderbergs. I hope a lot of people are paying attention, taking notes. Again, anybody who denies a conspiracy exists for world government, when you can see that the elites are meeting regularly, secretively. I mean, these are top-notch people, folks, that own and run the big corporations, that own the biggest lobbyist groups, that have the biggest influence on Congress and Parliament over in England and other nations, across Europe, up in Canada. These people, the big decision makers, meet secretively every year and do not allow any disclosure of the goings-on at their meetings. I mean, this should tell people something. It's obvious what we're dealing with here, what's going on here. These people have an agenda that is antithetical to ours, and hence the need for the secrecy. Anyway, it's very telling to take a look at a list of some of the attendees at Bilderberg meetings over the years. So let's do that at this time. Let's look at some of the prominent names that have attended Bilderberg meetings. Owen Lattimore, Council on Foreign Relations member, former Director of Planning and Coordination for the State Department. Just look at this. What do you think fascism is? When you see big names in business also holding, high governmental positions, what does that tell you, folks? What do you think they're going to do with those high-level positions in government when they have high-level positions with corporations, or at least former high-level corporate positions? They go, look at Dick Cheney. What better example can you come up with than that? Mr. Halliburton himself. Halliburton getting all the unbidded contracts. This is how it works. They don't give a rat's fanny about our interests. They use their political power and prestige to advance the interests of their buddies in the corporate world every single time. That, in and of itself, is a conspiracy. Aside from their secret agenda for world government, or not so secret agenda, I should say. But aside from that agenda, just the fact that, big money works together with big government to see that their interests are served. That's a conspiracy right there. Even if they weren't pushing for world government, that's still reason to break up this little cozy relationship, because our interests aren't being served. The interests of big money are being served. But those interests don't just involve securing their monopolies of wealth. It involves securing the monopolies of power, folks. And that power is, once again, world government. All right, short break. Stick with us. We'll have some more of these big names when we get back, folks. All right, folks. That's Hertz Radio. Second hour here. I got to start enough pace. We have a guest tomorrow and Wednesday. I don't know about Thursday and Friday yet, but eventually I think the pattern is going to be guests Mondays, Wednesdays, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and then Thursdays and Fridays I'll reserve for going off into my own tangents, like what I'm doing now. But eventually, that's what I'm planning on doing. Guests Mondays through Wednesdays. I had Jesse Ventura lined up. That was one of my surprise guests I talked about on earlier shows. So I was pretty excited about it, but that kind of fizzled for now. I might be able to get him coming up in maybe April or May, but he's not available now. He's pretty booked up. I had him booked for this Sunday, the 7th, but because I'm no longer doing Sunday shows, that wasn't an option. And when I got in touch with his secretary there, or agent or whatever, I asked her if I could book him for a weekday in the morning instead, and she says, no, he's booked solid, sorry, because, he's got a new book that just came out, American Conspiracies, it's called. Looks really good. I got a complimentary copy. I was thumbing through it. It looks really good, but unfortunately, the interview isn't going to pan out for now, but like I said, I'm going to try to get him back on either next month or in May sometime. But I did manage to find out what's going on with his show. It wasn't canceled. It's off the air right now simply because it was the end of the season. They kind of started late. They only did, 6 or 7 shows. But the plan is to have the show continue next fall because their ratings were very high. The highest ratings, in fact, for that network ever. True TV Network. So, looks like he's on in September. But, I'm hoping to get him on, like I said, either next month or in May sometime. So, I'll keep you posted on that. Anyway, let's continue with this list here of some of the more prominent members that have attended Bilderberg meetings over the years. Winston Lord, CFR member, Clinton's Assistant Secretary of State. Notice, they love having secretaries of state affiliated with them, because that's how they can get their agenda pushed through much easier. Alan Dulles, former CIA director, the man Kennedy fired as the CIA director, who later headed up the so-called investigation of Kennedy's death. No conflict of interest there, of course. Senator William J. Fulbright, former Rhodes scholar, he's from Arkansas, also prominent speaker at Bilderberg meetings. Dean Acheson, Secretary of State once again under Truman. Gabriel Haig, I'm not sure I guess that's H-A-U-G-E, Hage, whatever. Assistant to President Eisenhower, who, according to the Wall Street Journal, quote, helped teach Ike what to think. He later became chairman of Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company. I love that passion, guys. All right, let's break. Stick with us, guys. Play it back. All right, guys. Back on Hertz Radio. picking up with this list here. It just goes on and on. Big names. And again, often people involved with the State Department. Here's another one. He's been, a prominent featured guest speaker and attendee at Bilderberg meetings over the years, back in the 50s, 60s. George Ball, CFR member, once again. He was Johnson's Undersecretary of State from 1961 to 66, and foreign policy consultant later on to Nixon. Philip Jessup, representative to the International Court. Henry Kissinger, isn't that a surprise? He was the chairman of the Bilderberg group. Also, with Kissinger Associates. David Rockefeller, of course, Chase Manhattan Bank. He has been a prominent Bilderberg member. Nelson Rockefeller, that's no surprise. Lawrence Rockefeller, again, no surprise. Dean Rusk, Kennedy's Secretary of State, once again, check it out. Secretary of States keep popping up all over the place in this list. He was also former president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Ooh, how cozy. Gerald Ford was Bilderberg. Of course, pretty much all our presidents have been since the 50s. Henry Heinz II, chairman of the H.J. Heinz Company. Senator Henry Jackson. Senator Jacob Javits of New York. Prince Philip of Great Britain, of course. Lord Louis Mountbatten. Dennis Healey, former British Defense Minister. Let's see. Manlio Brosio, Secretary of NATO. Wilfred Baumgarten, Bank of France. Peter Jennings. Notice, guys, across the board, media, government, business officials. Guido Carli, Bank of Italy. Thomas Hughes, president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Ha, ha, what a misnomer that is. The people that brought us World War I. For those that have ever looked at the Reese Committee's notes from 1953, you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's another story. Robert S. McNamara, of course, Kennedy's Secretary of Defense, and former president of World Bank. Yes. Did you know that? He was the Presidente of the World Bank. Mr. McNamara, Bilderberg member. Margaret Thatcher, of course. Valerie Giscard d'Estaing, President of France. He's also a Bilderberger. Harold Wilson, Prime Minister of England. Edward Heath, Prime Minister of England again. William Bundy, former president of the Ford Foundation. Notice all these foundation heads, also Bilderbergers. That's no accident. That's what the Reese Committee was designed to investigate. Very damning evidence was uncovered regarding them. He was also the editor of the CFR's Foreign Affairs Journal for a time, William Bundy. John McCloy, former president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, Rockefeller's little baby. Christian Herter, Secretary of State, once again under Eisenhower, another Secretary of State. Over and over, guys. Probably more than any other sector of society. They love getting State Department officials on board with them. Lester Pearson, former Prime Minister of Canada. Or maybe I should say they only become Secretaries of State if they are Bilderbergs, instead of getting Secretaries of State on board with them. How's that sound? That's better. Shepard Stone, Director of International Affairs for the Ford Foundation. Notice, we got them all included. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford Foundation. Dirk U. Steiker, Secretary General of NATO, of Bilderberg, or at least attended Bilderberg meetings regularly. guest spoke at them. Gardner Cowles, editor-in-chief, publisher of Look magazine. Paul Hoffman of the Ford Foundation, U.S. Chief Foreign Aid, and head of the UN Special Fund, Donald H. Rumsfeld. Yes, Gerald Ford's and George W.'s Secretary of Defense. I wonder what that loser is up to these days. I haven't heard anything from him lately. Father Theodore Hesburgh, former president of Notre Dame University of Bilderberg. That's interesting. The Catholic Church claims that they're against secret societies. Well, that's kind of a joke, isn't it? Look at them with their Jesuits. But anyway, Helmut Schmidt, the Chancellor of West Germany, also Bilderberger. George Kennan, former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. Paul Nitz, Robert Anderson, chairman of Atlantic Richfield Company and head of the Aspen Institute of Humanistic Studies, nice globalist enterprise. Donald S. MacDonald, Canadian Minister of National Defense, another Bilderberg. Prince Klaus of the Netherlands. This was just goes on and on. Marcus Willenberg. You know what? I'm not even going to read all this because I got some of the other important things I want to cover, and time is racing away on us here. Maybe I'll just pick a few select ones. Let's see. Ambassador to NATO, Nuri Berge. Bill Moyers, of course. Good old Bill from PBS. Mr. Those crazy paranoid nut jobs that say 9/11 was an inside job. William Buckley, editor of National Review. John Rockefeller IV, that's no surprise. Cyrus Vance, Secretary of State, there's another one, under Carter. Let's see, who else? I get quite a list here, folks. I'm sure a lot of you have already read this. David McDonald, president of the United Steel Workers Union. They just don't leave any stone unturned. It's disgusting. Anyway, like I said, I'm just not gonna... I didn't realize I had so many names quoted here. Not necessary to go through them all, but you get the point. For those that weren't aware of this already, I'm sure you get the point. Big names in business, big names in government, especially the State Department, have been or still are either members of Bilderberg or have been prominent guest speakers there and certainly share in their agenda. Okay, guys, on a short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, folks. Welcome back. And, my apologies again. I'm only about half awake this morning. I'm not paying attention to the website to see if callers are calling in. My apologies if anybody tried to call in and I didn't pick up the line, but I'm looking now, I don't see anybody. So, yeah, if anybody wants to call in, 512-904-8014 is the number to do so. Let me pick up here where I left off. Bilderberg policy is carried out by a 35-member Bilderberg steering committee, if you will, including an inner circle known amongst themselves as the Advisory Committee, which is said to be made up of Giovanni Agnelli of Italy, David Rockefeller of the U.S., Eric Roll of Great Britain, and Wolfgang Amarongen of Germany. Some of the steering committee members have included, of course, Mr. Henry Kissinger, that freak. He pops up all over the place, hasn't he, in the sellout globalist world. Jessica Matthews, president of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. James Wolfensohn, current president of World Bank, I guess. I think he's still the current president. These notes are a few years old. Marie Jossie Kravis, the Senator Fellow, Hudson Institute, or Senior Fellow, excuse me. And then Jorma Olila, chairman of the board and CEO of Nokia Corp. Anyway, all American members of the steering committee are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. A few of the Bilderberg permanent U.S. members include George W. Ball, Gabriel Hodge, Richard C. Holbrooke, Winston Lord, Bill Moyers, and Paul Wolfowitz. Good old Wolfie boy. The permanent Bilderberg Secretariat is located at 1 Smithswater at The Hague, in the Netherlands, of course. Though another address is sometimes reported at 2301 De Leiden, also in the Hague, in the Netherlands. Their address in America was at 345 East 46th Street in New York City, which was also the location of the Trilateral Commission, incidentally, and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It now resides at the American Friends of Bilderberg's 477 Madison Avenue, 6th floor, in New York City. It is an IRS-approved charitable organization that received regular contributions from the likes of Exxon, Arco, and IBM. What a cozy little relationship. While their meetings are funded by the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and the Carnegie Endowment Fund. What a surprise that is. Can you imagine? Isn't this disgusting? Isn't this disgusting? The Constitution, folks, the way it's written, protects or is supposed to protect American citizens from direct taxes, right? It's only foreigners that pay a direct tax. And yet here you have these mostly foreign-run, totally antithetical to our interest organizations like the Bilderbergs that are considered charitable organizations, tax-exempt, when they're exerting a powerful influence, in fact, literally controlling our foreign and much of our domestic policies. Unbelievable. The treason is just beyond the pale, as Dick Cheney likes to say. Anyway, like the CFR, the Bilderbergs have been responsible for many fiascos over the years, using their influence in government to make killer profits and to change the direction of the world political scene. Here's some examples from over the years. The Goals 2000 program, developed during the presidency of George Bush Sr. to revamp the nation's public school system, was born at the April 1970 Bilderberg meeting in Bad Ragaz, Switzerland. The purpose of the new educational philosophy was the subordination of national ambitions to the idea of the international community. This was from their own documents, folks. Because our schools are, quote, too nationalistic, children in the future will be indoctrinated to consider themselves as world citizens. These are quotes from the 1970 Bilderberg meeting. Prior to the 1971 meeting in Woodstock, Virginia, Prince Bernard said that the subject of the meeting was the, quote, change in the world role of the United States. After the weekend conference, Kissinger was sent to Red China to open up trade relations, and an international monetary crisis developed, which prompted the devaluating of the dollar by 8.57%, which made, of course, a tremendous profit for those who converted to the European currency. Unbelievable, guys. These scumbags make their little decisions, and they're the only ones profiting. Everybody else suffers in more ways than one. And the plan still marches on. Nobody does anything. Nobody says anything about it. This crisis, by the way, has been blamed on the Yom Kippur War of October 6, 1973.
Thus, the impression most people have is that the situation was unavoidable. However, what many don't realize is that this war was staged. It probably never would have happened, except for the fact that despite the threat of an imminent Arab attack, the Israelis withdrew a significant number of troops from their forward positions. In other words, their guard was deliberately let down so that the Arabs would be enticed into attacking. Why would the Israelis do this? Because Henry Butt-Kiss Kissinger, who at that time was serving as both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, had assured them that the U.S. would support them with an enormous supply of advanced weaponry to drive out the Arab invaders should they attack, which is exactly what wound up happening. So this whole war was staged to precipitate this economic crisis. And again, Henry Kiss-Butt Kissinger was behind the whole operation. The only person in American history, by the way, who simultaneously held both those positions, National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. This whole plan, again, was orchestrated in May 1973 at the Bilderberg meetings in Saltsjöbaden, Sweden. Kissinger orchestrated them at a Bilderberg conference. At these meetings, a 400% increase in OPEC petroleum revenues was called for over the following decade, which is just about how much oil prices had risen by the early 80s. Went from about a quarter up to $1. Kissinger, of course, as I said, played a major role in this at that Bilderberger meeting. This is a matter of public record, by the way, folks. I've got tons of documents substantiating this. And we'll talk about that some more after the break. Stick with us. Be right back. Okay, guys. Welcome back to Truth Hertz Radio. I was talking before the break about how the 1973-74 energy crisis, the so-called oil shortage crisis, was staged. And it was. It was staged primarily by Mr. Butt-Kiss, Henry Kissinger, at the Bilderberg Conference in 73. And notice, let's see here, I think it was 71. No, the 73, yeah, it was May 1973 Bilderberg Conference. Anyway, notice this next quote. In early 1980, British journalist David Frost interviewed the Shah of Iran, who said that it was through tremendous pressure from David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger that Iran and other OPEC nations had significantly increased the price of oil between 1973 and 1974. Did you catch that? Astonishing. Unbelievable. So, I mean, they can stage this, they can stage the, there was a later crisis in 1978-79, oil crisis, that was all staged. Then they were claiming back in the summer of 2008, when oil rose up to over $4 a gallon. Oh, at that time it wasn't a shortage of oil itself. This time it was a shortage in the refineries. In the meantime, ExxonMobil's profit margin was soaring through the roof. Geez. God almighty. I don't know what it's going to take for people to, I don't know. They've been jerking and screwing us for decades on end, over and over, one major whopping fiasco after another. And every time you look at these crises, where everybody else suffers, you look at the profit margins of these big corporations, it's unbelievable. Obviously, we're dealing with a scam. Look at the 2008 bailout fiasco that still continues to this day. I'm told trillions of dollars have been stolen from the public treasury, most of which has been documented to have been handed out as bonus money, $100 million checks in bonus. It's unbelievable. And they're still doing it. They're still getting away with it, and the public is still snoozing and snoring away through the whole thing. I don't know. I still hope somebody's going to pinch me and wake me up from this bad dream that I just ate too many jalapenos before bed or something. Moving on to more fiascos orchestrated by the Bilderbergers over the years. In 1976, 15 representatives from the Soviet Union attended the Bilderberger meeting, which was held that year in the Arizona desert. It is believed that at that time, the plans were formulated for the breakup of communism in the Soviet Union later in 1990-91. At the 1978 meeting, they predicted that a depression would hit the world in 1979 and that the dollar would die. Their solution was to replace the dollar with an international bankor system, international banknote of currency that would be universally acceptable as a medium of exchange. The bankor system would have the international gold reserve deposited in a neutral country, such as Switzerland. It is an offshoot of the same Keynesian system developed at Bretton Woods in 1944, prior to the conclusion of World War II, at which time, of course, the GATT was formed, and the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. What a scam to loot the world in the wake of World War II. Anyway, it came from the idea of German economist Julius Wolff in 1892. This system would protect the globalist elites, of course, when they would spring their trap and the world economy would crumble. So this is yet future, of course. This hasn't happened yet, but this was being planned in 1978. How to bring the world economy down so they can introduce their global currency, their global bank. Guys, what we're seeing happening right now is obviously the preliminary stages of the fulfillment of that plan. The whole world economy right now is teetering on the edge of collapse. It's on the brink. It's unbelievable. Anyway, at their 1990 meeting at Glen Cove, Long Island, in New York, they decided that taxes had to be raised to pay more toward the debt owed to the international bankers. George Bush, Sr., who pledged during the campaign, "Read my lips, no new taxes," found himself signing one of the biggest tax increases in history on November 15, 1990, a move which was a contributing factor to his defeat when he ran for re-election. But they don't care, folks. They're only in office to do the bidding of their masters. They don't care if their reputation gets shattered. Georgie Boy Jr. certainly knew that he was going to be hated for a lot of the stuff that he did, but he doesn't care. He's going to be well cared for, well pampered the rest of his life. He's going to have Secret Service agents surrounding his home, protecting him. He doesn't care. They have no conscience, folks. Anyway, at the 1991, moving on here, at the 91 Bilderberg meeting at Black Forest Resort in Baden-Baden, Germany, the Bilderbergs discussed plans for a common European currency, i.e. the euro, which of course is now in place. And they also talked about European central banking. And they reviewed Middle Eastern events and developments in the Soviet Union. Rockefeller stated during this meeting, this is one of the most famous Rockefeller quotes. I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with it. But let's take a second look for those that are already familiar with this. For those that aren't, this is jaw-dropping. David Rockefeller stated, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. He's talking, of course, about the Bilderberg meetings that have been occurring since the 50s, for 40 years at that time. And he's thanking all these representatives from the Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, et al., thanking them for keeping their mouth shut, basically. Look what he said. He said, It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if it had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during these years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. He's thanking these major media heads for keeping their mouths shut, not alerting the public as to what has been going on at our private meetings. Without your cooperation, he said, it would have been impossible for us to make the great strides forward that we've made toward world government. It's incredible. You can have admissions like this made, and still people are in denial that there's a conspiracy for world government and that you're paranoid if you talk about such things. And yet, the top elitists who are behind this conspiracy have admitted it. Rockefeller, again, in his 2002 book, Memoirs, stated, there's many paranoid people who have accused me and my family of being responsible for destroying American sovereignty and trying to set up an international system of government, collaborating with others around the world to bring this about, blah, blah, blah. And then he ends off by saying, to those who make such charges, I plead guilty and I'm proud of it. First he's implying that it's not true, we're not doing this, and those who say so are paranoid. But then he ends off by saying, actually it is true and I'm proud of it. Unbelievable. And yet, you point this out to people and, they'll just turn a blind eye, a deaf ear. They put their head under the pillow. They don't want to hear it. But, again, those at the helm of this thing who have been planning this thing, scheming this thing, not only admit it, they boast about it. They're proud of it. They throw it in your face. Then Governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, who, of course, is a Rhodes Scholar, another secret society, was invited to speak at this same meeting that Rockefeller made that statement at. And a decision was made to endorse his candidacy at that meeting. According to Jim Tucker, I'm going to get him on sometime, a Spotlight reporter who had a source within the group codenamed Pipeline. Tucker has been spying on the Bilderberg since the mid-'70s, and he's told a lot of interesting stuff, and it's come to pass every time. The man's been right. Why? Because he knows what these scumbags are up to. Stuff going on at the meetings got leaked out to him. Okay, guys, short break. All right, guys. Final segment here for this broadcast. Try to finish up as much as I can here, but again, just request the notes. I'll set them off here for whatever I don't have time to cover. I mentioned Clinton was in attendance at the same 1991 Bilderberg conference where Rockefeller made that famous statement thanking the media for keeping their mouths shut. One of his top money men, Clinton's top money men, was an investor and international banker, Jackson Stevens, another Bilderberg member. Interestingly, this guy had donated $100,000 to the Bush Sr. campaign in 1988. And his wife was the co-chairman of the National Bush for President organization in 1988. Isn't that interesting? He became Clinton's top supporter in the 92 election process, and yet him and his wife were backing Bush in 88. It's unbelievable, guys. And people think that we have bipartisanship in this country. Oh, man. The left-right paradigm swinging pendulum game is designed for the gullible masses. So if you want to believe that, have at it, but that makes you part of the gullible masses. I'm so glad that the bulk of the listenership of this network is far more intelligent, too intelligent to fall for that kind of baloney. But it just sickens me to think that so many people still fall for this. There's no such thing as bipartisanship in this country, folks. It's one party. It's called the money party, or better yet, the globalist party. Anyway, let's go on to the 1992 Bilderberg meeting, see what kind of fiascos took place there. The group discussed the possibility of, quote, conditioning the public to accept the idea of a UN army that could, by force, impose its will on the international affairs of any nation. Or the internal affairs, of any nation. Isn't that interesting? Brainwash the public, i.e. condition the public into accepting the idea that the UN could enforce its will. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's something we should all want. Well, if we popped enough Prozac, maybe we could be convinced that it was a good thing because we're too stupid to think otherwise. But can you imagine this? To condition the public to accept the UN to impose its will. Notice, they admit it. Its will. What it wants. Well, who runs the UN? Who created the UN? That's the question. John D. Rockefeller Jr. fronting the $8 million check, which he stole, of course, from the U.S. Treasury with his chicanery in Washington. But nevertheless, $8 million by John D. Rockefeller Jr. Yes, to pay for the plot of land and the building of the UN headquarters in New York, out of the goodness of his heart, for his love of his fellow countrymen, and indeed the citizens of the whole world. He wanted to front this money to help pay for this wonderful institution that would bring freedom and peace and joy and happiness and, of course, prosperity to all of mankind. Yes, he managed to climb the ladder by sleazing his way up there, and now he wants everyone else to have that opportunity as well. He's not interested in protecting his monopoly and securing it so that nobody else can pose any threat to it. Of course not. Henry Kissinger, is that name again? He attended that 1992 meeting, and he made this statement thereat. Today, Americans would be outraged if UN forces entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. Can you imagine that? Unflippin' believable. Paul Geiget of the Wall Street Journal, another Bilderberger himself, attended the 1996 Bilderberger conference near Toronto, and when asked to comment about the happenings at this conference, he replied, and I quote, "The rules of the conference, which we all adhere to, are that we don't talk about what is said. It is all off the record. The fact that I attend is no secret." Well, the Bilderbergers do indeed have a rule of silence, as if you haven't guessed that already. After the June 2000 Bilderberger meeting in Brussels, Belgium, for example, a deliberately vague press release was issued, which ended with this statement: "Participants have agreed not to give interviews to the press during the meeting. In contacts with the news media after the conference, it is an established rule that no attribution should be made to individual participants of what was discussed during the meeting." So there is an official policy by the Bilderbergers for members to remain silent. Any discussion of what goes on is to be vague, nothing specific, very general, and no specific attributions of who said what. It's unbelievable. If what they're doing is so good for mankind, why do they have to condition, i.e. brainwash people? Why do they have to remain so, covert about what goes on at these meetings? It's obvious, folks. It's not good. It's not in the interest of the general public. Even on the rare occasions that an honest journalist desired to report on a Bilderberger conference, such a thing has always been found to be impossible. In 1971, for example, the Bilderberger conference for that year took place in Lawrence Rockefeller's Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Vermont. And, sorry guys, lost my place there. In Woodstock, Vermont, speaking of this upcoming conference, the Rutland, Vermont Herald newspaper reported in its April 20th issue, quote, "A rather tight lid of secrecy is being kept on the conference. The Woodstock Inn will apparently be sealed up like Fort Knox. No press coverage will be allowed, with the exception of issuing a statement at the end of the meeting, which, as always, revealed absolutely nothing. But notice,
the Woodstock Inn will be sealed up like Fort Knox. No press coverage will be allowed. And how do they ensure that no press coverage is allowed? They use our tax-paying money to pay for local and state and federal police to secure the place and make sure that nothing, that reporters are in line, that nobody, steps out of line, to make sure that they can keep this whole thing under wraps. It's unbelievable. Your tax dollars fund and secure their secrecy so that you never find out. But then again, we're made to pay for everything else. We pay for their phony wars, their global conquest battles. We send our sons and daughters over to fight them. And those who survive breathe depleted uranium so that they're dead in 5 to 10 years anyway from deadly cancerous tumors. Unbelievable, guys, the stuff that these scumbags get away with. Dr. Carol Quigley, author of Tragedy and Hope, made this revealing statement in his book. He said, "The powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and of the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalistic fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences." There you go. That's exactly what Bilderberger is and ever has been about. Don't forget, Quigley said that he was given access to Council on Foreign Relations archives for 2 years. He was allowed to go through their archives, and based on that and other research, that's what he wrote his book based on. It's a classic. Go get it, folks. It's about $40 on Amazon. It's very, very revealing. You might even be able to get a copy cheaper, a used copy. But he lays the whole thing bare, and that's what Bilderbergers are all about. I got a few more things I didn't have time to cover today, folks, but you got the gist. If you want the notes, once again, send me an email. I'll send them off to you. Okay, that's it for today. I'll have an interesting guest tomorrow. We'll catch you then.